Welcome to the Hindu Parenting Podcast. As we approach March 8th, celebrated as International Women's Day, it is a good time to talk about feminism and its influence on the modern Hindu family. When our girls and boys are bombarded with images and articles glamorizing Western style women's rights and repeatedly told about oppression and misogyny in Hindu Dharma, do we have an answer for them? Do we talk to our children about these things or just leave it for them to figure it out? Today, we are honored to have on our podcast a person with decades of experience dealing with questions of women's rights, Western feminism, and how it applies in the Indian context. A warm welcome to Madhu Kishwar, the well known author, speaker, public intellectual, and founder of Manushi Trust. Madhu Kishwar ji started her academic career as a lecturer in a Delhi University college, and in 1991 she was invited as a professor in CSDS, a leading social science research center based in Delhi. She was awarded National Professorship of ICSSR, Indian Council of Social Studies Research, followed by Senior Fellowship at Nehru Memorial Center for Contemporary Studies. Madhu Kishwar has also made several documentary films for Doordarshan. We are excited to have you, Madhuji, to share your thoughts and insights with us. A humble welcome and namaste to you.
Thank you so very much for inviting me. I'm honored to be on your podcast. And you know what a big admirer I am of the work your organization does. So for me, it's a big honor. Thank you for having me.
It's really gratifying to hear that. Words of praise coming from you. So, Madhuji, the average Hindu family today has no clear idea of Western feminism, but the young women today are taught to see everything happening around them through the lens of women's oppression. Added to which, in recent times, feminism has become a lightning rod, attracting adulation or criticism depending on who you talk to. We'd like to start with, what is feminism? How did it become such a force to reckon with?
Two things. Firstly, feminism is not a standalone ideology. It's part of the entire Abrahamic world's, what would you say, their moral universe, which is, as you well know, among the Abrahamics, it's always my way or the highway. And it doesn't just mean highway, it means you don't deserve to live. Those who don't convert to Christianity or to Islam don't deserve to live. And which is why wherever the ism mongers, Abrahamics, have gone or set foot, they have caused untold suffering, slaughters, mass slaughters, genocides, as well as cultural devastation. They destroyed languages, they destroyed cultures in an attempt to convert people to their lifestyle, to their worldview, to their ethical or unethical value systems, and making it out as if those who don't fall in line are uncivilized. So whether it's Marxism, liberalism, feminism, postmodernism, this ism, that ism, deconstructionism, reconstructionism, all of their isms have the same attitude, which is, if you're not with us, then you're an enemy. You need to be devastated. And you see the kind of ferocity with which a Marx argues with his opponents. They are to be slayed. They are to be proven to be a subhuman species simply because they don't agree. And each one of their isms does exactly the same with their opponents. Now, if you compare it with how we in the Indic traditions handled debates, discussions, Rajiv Malhotra talks about it extensively, which is you're not there to prove somebody wrong. You first have to prove that you understand them well, the Purva Paksha. And then the idea is to evolve a new consensus in the way that, for example, Adi Shankaracharya did. He invited people to debates and built a new consensus. He didn't go to slay and slaughter anybody, but to build a new consensus. That's how Hindu society, our tradition has functioned. And therefore, this whole business of being for or against, even their debating style is always for versus against. And you'll be pleased to know that as a 17-year-old, 18-year-old student of Miranda House, when I was made, first I was debating secretary, and then I became president of the debating society. And I found it truly banal to, even though I won debates, but I hated it to be put in either for or against slot. You had to prove the other person wrong, no matter how idiotic your own arguments are. And much depended on how glib you are. So, first thing I did on becoming president is to abolish debating society. And I said, we'll have a discussion forum. I was just 18 at that time because I felt that you have to be able to explore the multi-dimensional aspects of any situation, reality, issue in order to come to a sensible conclusion. So, feminism follows that tradition. And feminists, therefore, not surprisingly, behave like missionaries. When they come to India, when they descend on you here, they convince you that if you're not a feminist, you're an incomplete person, that your consciousness level is low. It's all about raising your consciousness level, huh? So that's exactly what the missionaries used to do, whether they went to Africa or they go to Nagaland, that these are subhuman creatures, not aware of their full potential. And unless they accept that thabba, that label, they can't be treated as, as worthy of redemption. So same mindset operates, be it socialism, be it feminism, be it postmodernism, or any of their isms. So the reason it became so powerful and devastating is the same reason that Christianity became so powerful and devastating, and the most dominant ideologies. Firstly, it comes with this civilizing mission and enters those societies who have been subjugated militarily first, so that they can actually then convince you that you are inferior. We've already conquered you. Now we are telling you how to live better lives, how to think more rationally. And in India, feminism came sort of around the mid-70s, I would say. Till then, there really wasn't. The International Women's Decade, starting 1975, is when the feminist mafia unleashed itself in India, first taking over key institutions like, for example, the Indian Council for Social Science Research. They gave a huge amount of money, the Ford Foundation and other foundations, Western foundations. They came with money bags and made sure they captured institutions through that. And because they had goodies to offer, they had handsome fellowships to offer, then people automatically gravitated towards ICSR and its agendas. They made sure then that they began writing the research agendas, the academic curriculum agendas for not just India, but wherever they entered. So it's the money power combined with patronage power. You could get scholarships to Western universities, or jobs even in India became dependent on how well versed you were in the feminist rhetoric and that worldview. And in between, all you had to do was use their catchphrases. In between, you could write any nonsense. It didn't matter, so long as you were on the right track and used the right vocabulary. And that's why when you closely examine their academic tracts, most of them are nonsensical or tell lies, misrepresent things grossly. But that ecosystem is such that even nonsense can be made respectable and provide you a lucrative career option.
Like Rajiv ji says, if you can't dazzle them with intelligence, baffle them with bullshit or something like that. He has one grand phrase, So it's all about vocabulary and jargon in the leftist circles, isn't
And
it?
it's a
Yeah,
very words,
but it
isn't
would
it?
not work if that leftist feminist jargon did not open lucrative career options.
Mm.
That's the key. See, it's not just the power of the mesmerizing academic ecosystem they create. No, it's that once you come and join their gang, then so many doors open for you. And if you resist, then so many doors are shut for you.
That
What could
plus the fact that this jargon, while it's only a very minuscule sort of group that uses it, it somehow filters down into the common thing. So you and I and the next person on the road will be using words like feminism without really knowing what it entails, what are the nuances, but we pick up those words from their jargon. How is it that they are able to filter it down to the masses like this, though they live in sort of ivory towers? It's a very small percentage that knows this jargon, but somehow it filters down to the masses. How does that happen?
See, it's very simple actually. If you look at how they mask their real intent, exactly like Christian missionaries. The rhetoric is very appealing, which is you're talking about equality. You're talking about gender justice. You're talking about things that normally in families you don't talk in the manner in which, and you're talking about giving more freedom to women or more freedom and rights to the oppressed poor. It's very attractive, the whole idea that it represents greater freedom and freedom from constraints, freedom from quote unquote oppressive customs, freedom from exploitation. It's very attractive for a youngster. And exactly what Christianity does, right? Or Islam does when it comes on a conversion mission. They do exactly the same. So the rhetoric and the mask they wear is very, very appealing, especially in societies where a certain amount of deference to tradition, to customs, to family, to elders, all that is valued. And that's what brings stability in society, that your family operates with certain checks and balances. You don't define freedom in ways that completely tear asunder the social unit that you're part of. And mind you, destructive ideologies are definitely more attractive than constructive. It takes so little to destroy.
Mm-hmm.
And it also appeals to your baser instincts. Constructive ideologies or sanskars take long time to nurture, take a lot of patience, take a lot of ability to give selflessly. And in return, of course, you get a lot of reverence, respect, trust, and a healthier social life. But it takes years to do that, to become a respected daughter-in-law in a family, or to be a son who's trusted with responsibility. It takes a lot, to actually prove your worth in positive ways. But to break up a family, what does it take? Very little. And so, destructive ideologies have always carried a lot of people with them for shorter or long periods. And we know from the triumph of Islam and the triumph of Christianity, and the fact that Sanatan Dharma, which is the acme of civilized thinking and ways of managing a very complex social fabric in ways that there is internal harmony and balance, that people are not running in opposite directions, not pulling things apart, but holding things together. And we got beaten very badly from them. So similarly, feminism trumps over women who are sanskari, who are rooted in their family culture, respected because they give, they have so much to give, and therefore they win veneration. Feminists have no patience for giving. It's all about taking. It's all about me, mine.
Yes.
And what I think I would like to also talk about this March 8, International Women's Day. From very early on, I began to question, why March 8? And I used to ask my feminist friends, you're celebrating International Women's Day. Why not start with choosing National Women's Day? Which day would you assign as Indian Women's Day? कौन है हमारा ऐसा दिन? Can we name one? Obviously, they had neither the need to know or desire to search their own history and say, can we find any such day? And then I remember in days when Aung San Suu Kyi was emerging as a voice of sanity against military dictatorship, I said, why not Asian Women's Day, her birthday? Manushi actually celebrated as a counter to International Women's Day, that this is the kind of woman I would like to see, who is the leader of men. She's leading whole society. She's not doing Zanana Dabba politics. Whereas feminism is all about pitching men against women. And then thinking that's very radical. But then I came to the conclusion that it can't be this or that woman. Our day, if I have to choose. Now, what happened on March 8? That it became a globally celebrated day. Nothing of great significance, except that on that day, I'm told, in 1857, a group of textile women workers marched against very oppressive working conditions. Okay, so big deal. Then what happened? What's so glorious about it? What's there to celebrate about a protest march of some women in America? We don't even know whether they got the rights that they demanded or they got a whack and a police charge at them. We don't even know what the outcome is. And in any case, nothing so great by way of celebratory meaning in it. So I began looking around and I came to the conclusion that for Indian women, it's the Navratris.
Yes.
They are our women's days.
Yes.
And the difference is that nobody needs to, no government, no UN agency needs to tell Indian women that Navratri festival represents the celebration of the feminine power. Now you're celebrating power that is recognized as part of our DNA, part of our gene pool, that feminine represents the divine force that moves the entire universe. And it comes in many forms. It comes in the form of a loving, devoted spouse like Sita. It comes in the form of Chandi with a Radra roop. It comes as a nurturing Ma Durga, but who can also acquire Radra roop if you step out of line. Lakshmi, the goddess of wealth, Saraswati, the goddess of learning, fine arts. I mean, there's so much to it. And those 9 days are celebrated not just by women, they're celebrated by whole society. Why do I need one day when my society not only marks these days, these auspicious days, when the whole country unites in celebrating feminine power and the many wonderful attributes that we identify with women or girls? Why do I need this silly protest some textile workers in America held with or without any consequences? Makes no sense to me at all. Therefore, I never was able to celebrate March 8 in the way that our feminist friends go, because money comes, you see, you get grants if you're celebrating March 8 International Day. Nobody otherwise. Have you ever seen even feminists without any foreign funding get together and do something very creative or joyful on March 8? I don't know anybody who does that. They gang up and they get together only if there is big function organized by some foreign funding agencies or some government agency which has given you a grant to make some inane speeches and do some song and dance about it. So it hasn't really got roots at all. And with the decline of feminism, even in the West, where terms like feminazis are being used very liberally, and the consequences of this, the lethal consequences of this ideology are becoming obvious. Even there, nobody just gets up and says, this is my day. And a society which gives you just one day doesn't think very much of you. And that too, wants you to remember your protest as an oppressed being. There's nothing to celebrate if your society considers you an oppressed or worthy of oppression. There's celebration only when your society actually considers you worthy of being worthy of even better rights than men occupy. That puts you on a higher pedestal as compared to men. That's what Hindu society celebrates. So for me, this equality that feminism brings is a very poor thing. And that's why one of my most controversial as well as one of my most celebrated essays was written in 1980s, Why I Do Not Call Myself a Feminist. I mean, some never forgave me for that, and some really celebrated me for saying it out loud and clear that this is a banal ideology, and to see the world through the prism of isms is to box your thinking, is pigeonhole your thinking, and that all ideologies are time-specific, culture-specific, situation-specific. That's what Sanatana Dharma and our Shastras teach us, that nothing is to be written in stone. And even the notion of equality has to be culturally relevant. It can't be defined in the same way. My aspiration of a good life cannot be the same as that of a battered woman in America or a woman struggling for equal rights, for equal pay, or equal work for equal pay kind of battle, when we've had very different battles and very different achievements to our credit.
You've often mentioned that feminism is an ideology that has been derived from Abrahamic thought. So we need to know clearly how Abrahamic thought differs from Sanatana Dharma. I think it starts there, and especially as you consider the way women are viewed in both these cultures. One is the Abrahamic thought system and one Sanatana Dharma. So how much of a difference is there, and what would you say is the key difference in the way the society views women?
See, firstly, I mean, if you look at the Western world and the Christian worldview with regard to women, their mythology, it treats the feminine as evil incarnate. Eve actually contributed to the fall of mankind. Why? Because she encouraged Adam to eat the fruit from the tree of knowledge. So, which means you shun knowledge. And once she succeeds in tempting Adam, she's a temptress. And then with that comes the awareness of sex, and they hide their body parts, their sexual parts. So, sex is evil. The feminine body is evil. She's a temptress. She caused the fall of mankind. That's their worldview. Now, the point is, Western women have every reason to be outraged at that portrayal of their being. But I have not been treated like that. You know, if I studied well, I would be called Saraswati incarnate. If I got into Raudra Roop to protest some wrong, say, Are ye Durga Chandi Roop le legi, so better be watchful. Don't mess with her. So I could express myself in so many ways, each one of them very, very empowering. What will I do with this worldview where the woman is supposed to be a seductive temptress called leading to the fall of mankind, all of mankind, even those who were never born, yet to be born, for millions of years, this woman caused the fall of mankind. I mean, what a hideous worldview. And from there, they have to protest. I celebrate Western women who protested and said, hell with your Bible and hell with your Christian worldview. We don't accept it. They needed to protest that. But why do I have to internalize that? Because that's not my reality. And what will I do with that mere equality when my society is treating me as more than equal? From the day I was born, my parents, who never read Bertrand Russell or Marx and Engels or any of their feminist tracts, they really treated me as a special being in the way that many daughters are. Lakshmi aayi hai ghar mein. That's how the birth of a daughter was traditionally celebrated. Now, of course, we went through decline period due to foreign invasions, first the Islamic brutalities, when the distress response of Hindu society was to protect women by making sure that they withdrew from the public life because their daughters would be abducted, taken away, and brutalized. So we had to, the Hindu society had to, under that distress, adopt many oppressive practices, which appear oppressive now, but they were self-preservation. Then came the colonial missionaries or the colonial rulers who did their own hanky-panky and downgraded women's rights. I mean, for example, they took away property rights through their land settlement operations and the newfangled laws they brought in. So women's status certainly did get downgraded. Now, all these legacies they attribute to us as our Hindu pathologies. No, you forced certain very oppressive practices on our society, which are not intrinsic to it, to Hindu tradition. So that's one big difference, that they start from such a low point for women, that there a certain confrontation, conflict, and the men are not used to treating women with respect because of this mindset. So women had to fight. Good for them. Good that Western men faced the wrath and the ire of Western feminists. In the process, they went haywire because their society doesn't allow for balance. And that brings me to the second big difference. In Hindu Sanatan, within the dharmik traditions, we are always looking for equilibrium, harmony. That's the key word, consensus. Even when we debate, like for example, the traditional panchayats, when certain disputes came, no matter what the source, what the social status, they never decided anything by majority vote. in our traditional panchayats. It was always by consensus. Even if it took days on end, you had to bring the contending parties to agree to mutually acceptable solutions. Only then can you arrive at an equilibrium. But the Western world, or the Abrahamic world, believes in victory versus defeat. And they invariably bring warfare, a whole mindset of warfare. I mean, their quotes, for example, so you lose or you win. Just as their debates, the Oxford, Cambridge debates, you lose or you win. You can't arrive at consensus in their world. And feminism, just as Marxism brought in class warfare, now they're bringing in the critical race theory, racial warfare. Similarly, gender war. They brought in the vocabulary of gender war and they step in. So if there is a small tension in the family, they make sure that the family breaks apart, and it leads to freedom for women means divorce, walking out. I remember when these feminists used to come interviewing me in those days when I was a celebrated leader of, or whatever, the mother of Indian feminism is how they used to describe me, no matter how many times I said I'm not a feminist. They would always say, the divorce rate is so low in India. Why? Isn't it because your women are not aware of their rights? I said, you have to be crazy to think that high divorce rate is a sign of greater empowerment of women. Because these women, after being divorced, then they go hunting for other men. It's not, as they say, as if they're capable of saying, hell with men, we can live on our own. No, they're stealing each other's husbands. They're doing all kinds of demeaning things to hook this or that man. So what is so great about divorcing and then chasing other men? Now, when you define freedom as freedom from family, freedom from social responsibility, then you come to a situation when your society becomes rudderless. Children don't know whether they can count on their parents to stay together another week or another 2 days, whether they'll be their parents tomorrow or will pair up with someone else, and that lack of social security for women, which is why you see so much of disorientation, drug addiction, and all manners of personality disorders that the Western kids start displaying very early on. Because there's no there's no emotional security in such like situations. And if that's what you call freedom, or for example, my body, my right, I can't think of a stupider slogan. Of course, your body should be your rightful domain. However, my body, my right, my responsibility, they never add. If it's not your responsibility, that means you're sleeping all the time and you think having free sex, jumping into bed with this or that person is your right, and that's your way to assert freedom. But then what do you end up with in the process? You're fucked up, not only in the body, but in the head. Because sex is not just about that momentary pleasure. It's a bonding of two human beings. And that intimate relation has consequences. You bring new life into this world through that union. And that's why in our culture, we considered it a sacred union. But if you desacralize it and you think free sex is the answer, just because men have been sexually irresponsible, we will outperform you. Now, too much of feminism is about trying to be as good as men after condemning men for being monsters. So you end up with so many feminine monsters then.
Yeah. Absolutely true. Okay, so I think, when you were speaking, I mean, what you said just now covered such a lot of ground. I think it covered so many things that we wanted to ask you, but it left me with one thought. Um, I mean, we have been a culture that celebrated women, and as you said, when a baby girl is born, we always say "Lakshmi aayi hai ghar mein," So, what then led to this fetish for the male child that is also thrown upon Hindus now? That we always, and it's not just an allegation. I have seen people who actually display that. That they have a preference for the male child. So when did this preference for the male child start, and what led to that?
It's very clear from our own history that pathologies like female infanticide started taking place or arose during Islamic rule. For the simple reason that wherever Islam set foot, it carried out mass slaughters. To resist Islamic invasions, you needed able-bodied males. And therefore, every community required strong, martially trained males. Secondly, that could happen anytime. But you see, we never had in pre-Islamic India witnessed conquests in which the conquering person or the conqueror captured women as sex slaves. They captured lakhs of women, every one of them, this capturing wombs because they want to multiply rapidly. That's one. And secondly, Islam is all about sex, sex, sex. And therefore, lakhs of women would be captured, sold as sex slaves, actually naked. I mean, sold naked bodied or put in harems. Even Akbar's harem had 3,000 women. There was no Jodha Akbar. I mean, that whole bullshit romance about Jodha is just that fictional bullshit. They all were very decadent with regard to women, and they all, from top to bottom, used women as sex slaves. In the harems, as I said, the top badshahs had thousands, but even their nobles would keep hundreds. In such a situation, protecting women becomes, which is why another pathology, which is jauhar, which is self-immolation. Women jumping onto the pyre because they would even defile dead bodies of women. In Islam, it's actually allowed to have sex with dead bodies, to defile dead bodies. So that's why it wasn't enough for Rajput women or women of royal families whose husbands or sons got slaughtered in war. It wasn't enough that they swallowed some poison and killed themselves. They chose self-immolation, jauhar, even during partition. Why is it that unlimited number of women who jumped into wells in order to escape Islamic capture? Because they knew that their dead bodies would also be defiled. And we consider the dead body, antim sanskar, as something very important. That those horrible things would happen to your daughter's body or to your body is something that was very alien to Hindu mind. And the pathology of jauhar, they think, is because Hindus are so anti-women. No, it's because Hindu women couldn't stand that indignity. So in order to save your women, if you couldn't save them and you needed manpower to fight these brutes, then son preference is the inevitable consequence. Similarly, during British rule, see, they brought in a lot of crime. To handle the government machinery or to handle the police, you actually, I mean, if I had to relive my life in the corruption-ridden, crime-ridden India, even of today, I'd say I need at least 5 sons. One who will be an out and out gunda, who can handle, collect mobs in no time in the way that Islamists manage. I would need one son in the police, another one IS officer or somewhere in the bureaucracy, another one income tax officer or whatever, because handling the government machinery is a nightmare. And most of us women, now, of course, women are taken to crime and corruption in a big way because they want to prove themselves as good as men. But traditionally, most women have shied from such things. And therefore, having sons became important. When there's no security of life, there's no security of your property, it can be taken away at will. In Punjab, for example, there is a saying, Jitne ladke utne lat, jitne lat utna kabza, which means the muscle power that you have. If you have large number of sons, you have greater muscle power. And the greater muscle power you have enables you to occupy or keep control of your own land. You see the fate of women who end up as sonless widows. The lands are taken away, not necessarily by their relatives, but a corrupt politician, a sarpanch, or, people in the same village who have political clout on account of their dealings or their closeness to corrupt officials or police, will just grab your land. And a woman who's sonless, doesn't have able-bodied men in the family, just as daughters, is very likely to lose her assets. So son preference became necessary as a survival strategy. And daughter aversion in a culture where daughters are going to be abducted in broad daylight, taken away, and you can't do anything about it, as it is happening in Pakistan and Bangladesh even today, as it happens in Mewat even within India. Now, when Hindus of Pakistan or Bangladesh who know that their daughters can be taken away from them any minute, neither the police, nor the political establishment, nor the bureaucracy, nor politicians, nobody's come to their rescue. Would you want to have daughters? No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. So wherever daughter aversion became a set practice, where people would kill their daughters upon birth. I mean, it happened, say, in Rajasthan, which witnessed the most brutal battles with Mughals and other Islamic invaders, who treated not just unarmed populations with great barbarism, but especially women. They were their targets. It happened in most of North India, but wherever Islamic tyranny did not set foot, you don't have daughter aversion. The sex ratio is very evenly balanced. In places like Kerala, it used to be in favor of women. But now, with large parts of Kerala being Islamized, I'm sure the sex ratio decline is going to be very severe. Because Hindu families there, the Kerala story tells you what's happening to the plight of Hindu girls. So if you want women to be honored, then social harmony, peace, security is very essential. Or else women become as brutal as men, and try to outperform men in aggression, in all the evil things that we associate with perverse masculinity. I mean, look at Mamta Banerjee. Who can call her a woman?
Mhm. True.
That's the kind of politician you produce when you have a large percentage of your population that is Muslim. The Bengali Bhadralok could not possibly have thrown up a political leader like Mamata Banerjee. It's only when a critical mass of Bengal's population turned Islamic that you have a Mamata Banerjee at the topmost seat of power.
That's an interesting thought. There's much to think about in what you've said. I'd like to draw your attention to conflicting messages that young girls today receive from everywhere. Let's say the media and movies. For example, Kanyadan is regressive, but giving the bride away is fashionable. The ghungat is regressive. The the hijab is fashionable. So, what is your advice for the women, for the younger women and girls of today? How can they navigate this? What sort of skills will help them, see through this? And I guess that's a big point for the parents also to consider, because the younger the girl child is, it's the parent who needs to teach them how to think through these things. So I'd like to have your thoughts on that.
See, firstly, we need to distinguish between those traditions and paramparas that are part of Hindu culture and those that were adopted as a distress response during Islamic rule. The ghungat is definitely an Islamic era pathology. You never see ghungat in areas where Islam did not establish roots. Most of South India did not have ghungat. Northeast India, Assam, Manipur, none of these places observed ghungat. Ghungat became typical in Rajasthan, in Haryana, in parts of Punjab, Uttar Pradesh, where Islamic power really established its tentacles deep and women weren't safe. Which is why, for example, North Indian weddings are held at night. They used to hold them at night because they used to take away the bride. So in the dead of night, they would conduct the wedding and the doli, the sending away of the daughter, simply so that they do not attract attention. Now, of course, holding night weddings is part of a glamorous sound and light function and, all the funfair that goes with it. But traditionally, Hindu weddings were held during daytime, not at night. Now, the ghungat is part of that. Don't show your face. Let me tell you the story that my mother used to tell. She grew up in Peshawar, which, as you know, was a stronghold of very, very rigid Islamic cultural mores. And my mother, though she studied at that time, first in an Arya Samaj school and then in a convent school, used to tell me that they were sent in a tonga, which was covered with a thick chadar. Not only that they had to wear thick chadar, cover their head, the girls, but the tonga itself would be covered with a thick chadar, because if they set eyes on any girl and they took a fancy to it, well, then she was gone. Now, that family, but I've seen photographs of my mother in a school or college or whatever compound, in that missionary school compound. And they're normal. They're not wearing those chadors, because in the missionary school, in the convent school, that was not required. But from home, they had to. They never went out shopping. But when they came to Delhi, it's amazing how, as partition refugees, their first home was in the old Delhi Jama Masjid area. A lot of refugees got temporary shelter there. So they were still surrounded by Muslim families, but they were living in a Hindu majority India and not in Peshawar anymore. And believe you me, I see pictures of my aunts my Masis, not even wearing dupattas. They used to ride bicycles, go to school, college in bicycles. They started going to see evening show movies in Connaught Place, were shopping on their own. Within 2, 3 years, I mean, the pictures, post-partition pictures of my Masis or even my mother, nobody's even covering their head. They're riding bicycles. They're going to college. They're doing everything without the slightest show of restrictions. 6 to 9 show, huh? In those days, my
Those days.
masses would go and have, right? Or
Yeah.
going to not place for shopping on their own, without any male or escort, or without my nani taking them under their wings. All that happened so fast. So if they had continued staying in Peshawar, well, my life would have been the same, right? But because I grew up in Delhi and my masses were already living very free life, as I told you, cycle चला रहे हैं college जाने के लिए. Even though at that time they were living in a Muslim uh, majority or equal, I don't know. But it was a Muslim neighborhood near Jama Masjid. But Muslims at that time were not so menacing. Today, no Hindu family can live the way as freely as my maternal grandparents' family lived, because soon after the partition, the Muslims were a little timid, but not today. Now, the point that I'm making is that we have to distinguish between pathologies that we adopted and not consider Ghungat as part of Hindu culture. Nor, of course, the kind of bizarre clothes and body display that young women are indulging in. It's obscene, it's ugly, plain ugly, simply because you're copying it from the West. The way our film stars, Bollywood stars, the latka chatkas. Now, what do we tell these women who think Kanyadan is bad, but giving away daughter is not? The fact of the matter is that parents themselves don't know how to explain the whole idea of Kanyadan. And Dan is not, you see, we have also misunderstood the word Dan in a way that you give to the poor something you don't want. You know, you see ads in Delhi, for example, very often see ads, Dan ke kambal. They are the cheapest kind of blankets people buy to give to the poor. Now, in Dan, you're supposed to give something precious as a gift. It's Dan is not the 10 rupees you gave to a beggar. No. The Samrats used to hold these big yagyas and empty out their treasuries. And that was Dan. Dan is not what I give to a roadside beggar, or some old clothes I give to some poor person in my neighborhood. No, or a maid, or no, that's not Dan. That's getting rid of your old clothes. We've misunderstood because this whole idea that Dan is something lowly, that you give to lowly people. That's not what it's all about. And the fact of the matter is, the implant of your daughter in another family is not possible if you're constantly interfering in it day to day. You have to let go. You have to let go and let her establish roots there. It's a precious gift you have given to that family. It's a precious gift. And it's not just that they will critique us for this Kanyadan. Mind you, the missionaries and the colonial administrators made as many nasty, demeaning comments about those communities in India which had a tradition of the bride's family getting gifts from the groom's family. They called it bride price, and they called it like you're selling your daughter. So even that is not good enough for them, no matter what we did. Whether Indian women wore, in areas where they wore blouseless saris, they thought this is obscenity, the Victorian minded. And they made sure the Bengali Bhadralok wore those Victorian high neck blouses and, and full sleeved, whatever. They didn't like that kind of nudity. But they also, they considered it uncivilized, and they made sure they dressed you as per Victorian norms. Now that women then adopted those stricter norms about not body display, now they want us to shed clothes and lie down naked on beaches. So they're not stable themselves in what is sensible behavior. The one thing you cannot expect from the West is sensible balance in their way of thinking. They have to move from one pendulum swing to another pendulum swing. And that's where our youngsters go crazy, whether it's fashion. So it's either maxi skirts that touch your toes, or mini skirts that expose your panties. I mean, it has to be something different, new, shocking, and just that they make sure you change your clothes, you discard, you buy new. The fashion industry can't function without that. So I think it's a lot to do with first being able to explain to your kids and knowing yourself what these rituals are about. If you don't know, if your parents don't know, and they're just doing it simply because these rituals have to be carried out, then obviously you don't blame your children. Secondly, I think English medium education was meant to and has effectively created generational rifts. I can say it even from my own life. I wasn't as crazy ever, but still, because of my education, when I went to Miranda House and the kind of situation I saw and the kind of things I had to fight against, my parents couldn't understand it. So our communication stopped because they couldn't understand why I was turning into a rebel. You know, um, the entire leftist and or even things like making you think that your own cultural traditions are an anathema. They don't belong to this world. I remember in my hostel room when I was studying English honors, and my friend saw my mother's copy of Ramayana, Tulsi Ramayana, in my room, and I was made fun of. But Milton's Paradise Lost is a great classic. Yeah. Right? But this wasn't. So the point I'm making is that the intergenerational conflict is inherent in Western Abrahamic world, because their worldview is this linear worldview. You move from Stone Age to Bronze Age to Iron Age to this age, and we are the smartest. Our ancestors were backward, they were chimpanzees, and our parents can't be that smart because they didn't know about all these scientific advances and they didn't know about this and that. So to consider your ancestors as backward is ingrained in their mindset because their view of progress is linear. For the Hindu mindset, because we move in cycles. And for most Hindus, Ram Rajya is still the acme of perfection. We don't think any democracy can match the values, the ethical values of governance that Ram Rajya represents, or the standards of personal integrity displayed by the characters of Ramayana, or even in Mahabharata. We don't think of them as backward. Our view is that we can't be as good as them. If only we could be, we could have a son who follows in the footsteps of Ram and a brother who's like Bharat incarnate. We can't think of higher standards, but they think all that was before them was all backward, and they are the acme of progress as of today. So Warfare is inherent. Intergenerational warfare is inherent. Ideational warfare is inherent. Listening to older parents, it means you are slave of tradition. You're not progressive. Progressive means to kick away at the past, to think of it as, uh, as an unwanted encroachment on your freedom. We don't think like that, at least traditionally. Now, the point is, unless this is lived by parents themselves, then you can't convince parents. And we really have to do away with a convent school education. The missionary schools are actually creating a lot of a situation of intergenerational warfare, interfamily warfare, gender warfare, every kind of warfare in our society, and even the English medium schools, because they follow the same curriculum, the same value system. So, unless we shift to education through our own languages and study languages, our own languages through our own literature, we will not be able to resolve this dilemma. It requires a major rehaul. And that, see, if you read the Ramayana, if your grandmother is rooted in the same value system as a granddaughter, and Ramayana provides the link of what is righteous behavior, how do you treat the elders, and how do the elders treat the youngsters, then there's no scope for intergenerational conflict. But when the generation of today is reading Simone de Beauvoir or Germaine Greer or whatever, all that junk, then it is inevitable, because your parents won't even understand what it's all about. I know I'm taking long, but let me tell you this story. Some 8 months ago, a young woman doing her MPhil or just finished her MPhil came to me for job as a research assistant. So I'm talking to her, trying to figure out what her life is all about, what she wants to do in life. And then she tells me, from Miranda House, my own alma mater, says, my biggest problem is I don't know how to convince my mother that she's an oppressed woman. I said, why do you want to convince her that? Yeah, but she's dependent on my father. So very patiently, I went through this conversation with her. I said, does he beat her? No, he doesn't. Does he abuse her? No, 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 he doesn't abuse. Does he deny her household expenses or personal expenses? No, 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 he's very easy on that. Does he stop her from going out, meeting her friends or her own family? No, that's not a problem. So I said, what's your problem? Then what is it? No, but she's still dependent on him. And, he's the boss, basically. So I said, how old are you? Okay, I'm 21, 22, whatever. So I said, who's supporting you? Who's supporting your education? My father. So I said, aren't you dependent on him? Get out. Why don't you go live on your own? I mean, you want independence. You want your mother to be free of that dependence, but when you yourself are not. In the West, where they express freedom, well, by 18, their parents kick them out of the house. They don't support their education. They say, go take your loans and go do your own thing. Now we've done enough for you. Now, can you imagine? You want your mother to be miserable. Now, I could understand if she told me, look, my father's beating my mother, and that's really upsetting my mental balance, because I can't see my mother in that state of abuse and oppression. No, none of those problems. But she wants her mother to be unhappy and rebel, so that whatever stability there is in family should be destroyed. And really, the manner in which feminists have tried to demasculinize men is become one of the biggest pathologies of all times in all societies where feminism has taken root. It's not that they are happy if the man becomes like a domestic slave. No, they want him to be a fat earner. They want him to earn more and be the mainstay of the family economically. They want him to provide all the luxuries, one. Then, when it comes to issues of protection, they certainly can't stand a man who will run at the sight of a predator. They want him to suddenly turn into a filmy hero and take on. And which is why so many of these young women are falling for Islamists, because they have this macho image of themselves that they, nobody dare touch you if you're going with me. That's one thing that they sell very effectively, that if you are dating a Hindu boy, anybody can do whatever he likes. Even in Kerala's story, this comes out very well. So they want all the privileges of masculinity. They want 6 apps or 8 apps or whatever, they fall for that. They drool over that. But at the same time, they want to destroy the self-esteem of men as providers of the family, and yet provide not just basic necessities, but even luxuries. These women are spending more on their beauty parlor treatments than my mother used to spend on her monthly household budget.
And it's never enough. It's never enough.
And yet, be demasculinized, take your abuse, the manner in which some of these women talk to their husbands or their boyfriends, the vocabulary, ma ben ki gali. And they think that's expressing their feminine power in very creative ways. You asked me my message to young women, my first and foremost message to young women today. Nobody is a better well-wisher of you than your parents. Unless they're crackpots and they're wackos and they're, psychologically disturbed persons and they themselves need help. There are a few parents who deserve care, medical care they need. But most parents deserve to be taken more seriously than any of your friends. And needless rebellion against your parents will land you in deep mess and deep trouble. And define your freedom in ways that keep the family together rather than break it up, rather than tear it asunder. There is no other institution which will give you what a caring family can give you. Your parents, your siblings, your aunts, your uncles, value them and nurture these relationships. Nobody will give you what they can give you. Not the best of friends and not the best of or the worst of boyfriends.
We really have to thank you. This is a great honor, really, to have you.
As I said, I value very much the contribution that your organization is making. And Infinity Foundation is a major milestone in the history of post-independence India. And I want to thank you all for keeping it not just alive, it's the most vibrant organization and producing so many intellectual warriors. My gratitude to all of you.
Thank you, Madhuji. Thank you very much for coming on the show. Thank you. And to our listeners, please subscribe to us. We are at hinduparenting.substack.com. We are available on all social media platforms. We go by the handle Hindu Parenting. So please follow us wherever you find it convenient for you. We are on YouTube. Our channel is called Hindu Parenting Podcast. So please catch us there. And we are also available on all podcast platforms. So you can catch us there. And I hope you have enjoyed this conversation as much as we have had putting it up for you. Thank you very much. And until the next time.